telling me that she was painting a mural in her apartment. I say, I don't want to listen about this. Because I say, who is going to pay for this wall? And, I was looking, we are going, as the institute to pay, to repay for the... And she said, don't worry, I am, I have something over the wall. No, so I was like,
No. It's a homemade wall. Charlie and I constructed it.
yeah, and they explained me because I was like, oh, no. I had to pay, and then she's, but it's having a wonderful experience for her, and she has really a big talent. And another thing, I would like before, thank you again, I would like before I give you 5 minutes to say that we have another, not only the two next student for the next week, but we have a student in Japan who is engaged in her capstone that she would have been not able to return. She's doing a capstone about the repercussion of the Hiroshima bomb in Japan. And when we were talking, Yoshiko, who is their advisor, Professor Abbott, when we were talking about her, we were looking how the bomb impact the life of the people, and why the people don't want to talk about this, and what is the result of the creation of this museum there. What are they are going there, and because not everyone is going, because it's a very hard thing to do, and the representation, what the people have said, and we were saying her to look, if the people from Japan will be different from another ethnicity, if the United States will be ready to push the bomb there. Because I always pushing my students, to look behind whatever, for the political controversy. And she's engaged there, and maybe Yoshiko wants to say something about this, Yoshiko?
Well, she's really working very hard, and I think she's working almost like writing a thesis. I told her, Maria and I was telling her that this is a capstone project, not a thesis.
Yeah, she's doing like a PhD. But the student became so engaged that really they want to pursue this later, and I think this is the basis. So you have 5 minutes more, and thank you again. Baby, I have different people, she's like when she came to my class the last year at the pro seminar, the major pro seminar, and I said, my God, okay, she's so distant from my culture. I don't know if she's going to be comfortable, with the way that I am teaching, I am presenting myself. And I said, I want her, to be sure that she's going to be listened here, that her voice is going to be heard in my class. And one day she said, I have enough. And I said, that's it. You remember Maria? Okay. And she said, I don't want to listen about anything. You are talking about this. I am also a poor woman. And I am educated. And she started, I said, that's it. And people were like, wow. And so I feel very comfortable because she has, the opportunity to be here, and she was not afraid to do that. So I always, remember this from you. She didn't say, I am going to listen to all the people and I'm going to, shut my mouth and say, but she said she has very strong opinion, and she was able, and I think, all the time to tell this in my class. She's talking about something that is very dear for me, because I want to do a project, a research in Mexico, about blacks in Mexico. And I don't know if we were in the same page, I don't know. And suddenly we were talking, about, and I remember another student when I said, I did a research in Mexico about blacks, and someone say, in Mexico are no blacks? My students say that. And I say, huh?
Mexican needed.
And she said, no, in Mexico is no black. And then we were talking in the class, and I said, what about the people when I go to Mexico, they told me that I am from Veracruz. And some of the Mexican students say, yeah, because you are black. And they say, okay, are or there are no blacks in Mexico? And she started to do a research about the black culture in Mexico and the blacks today in Mexico. And she has, because all my students have to do a really hard research, she has contacted some of the professors who's working in the field in Mexico. So we have here Charlie.
Hola, mi nombre es Charlie Pedroia y el título de mi proyecto de capstone se llama La herencia negra de México y voy a hablar en inglés porque me siento más cómoda. Okay. Well, before I begin, I'd just like to tell you about how I became interested in the subject. About a year ago, I had a Mexican history class with Professor Lorenzo Covarrubias, and he made a statement one day in class that really had a profound effect on me. He said that there were more black slaves brought to Mexico than any other country in America, and I just couldn't believe it. I didn't know there were blacks in Mexico. I've been to Mexico several times, and I didn't really see, any blacks there. I mean, I knew there were slaves brought to the United States, that's pretty obvious, and I knew there were slaves brought to Brazil, Cuba, Haiti, places like that, but Mexico seemed a little odd to me, so I decided to pursue the subject. So to begin with, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history and how blacks arrived in Mexico. I'm going to talk about how they became free, because the ways in which they became free were very different than the ways in Mexico, were very different than the ways they became free in the United States and what I'm used to. I'm also going to talk about the caste system that developed out of the slavery, the black slavery in Mexico, and out of the caste system arise issues of race. So let's start with the history of it all. Well, I mean, I'm sure, as you know, slavery is nothing new. It's been around for thousands and thousands of years. But the African slave trade on the Iberian Peninsula actually began in the middle of the 15th century when a Portuguese sailor, Amparo Gonzalez, traveled down the coast of West Africa and he captured himself 2 black men, brought him back to Portugal, and this inspired many others to follow in his footsteps. And it was 10 years later, not even 10 years later, Lisbon, they called it the New Babylon. There were at least 800 blacks shipped into Portugal every year. And this spread on into Spain as well. So the Catholic Church pretty much condoned this behavior because they said that since the Africans wouldn't convert to Christianity, then they were suitable for slavery. So this was a booming economy for many years. And 40 years later, Columbus discovers America, and many other conquistadors followed in his footsteps. So in 1519, Hernán Cortez arrived at the port of Veracruz, bringing with him soldiers, artisans, slaves, of course, and with him were quite a few free black men. They helped in the conquering of Tenochtitlan, which was the Aztec capital, and just a few men reigned over thousands of indigenous people, and the indigenous were initially used as slaves to do the work that Cortez wanted as far as getting gold and building structures and pretty much doing his bidding. But unknowingly, Cortez and his men in total 500,000 African people shipped into Mexico during the colonial period. Now, I'm going to talk about the ways in which slaves became free. And slavery to the Iberians, to the Spanish and the Portuguese, was a very different idea than the English had. They considered slavery as a temporary condition. And because they also considered these slaves to have souls, they were actually human beings as opposed to the English idea of a slave. They were protected under a group of laws called Las Leyes de Partidos, and this protected the slaves as far as their human rights, the ways that they should be treated by their slave masters, and recourses that they had in case something went wrong. But as you will see, there were atrocities committed in the New World because these slave masters were so far away from the crown that the laws couldn't be enforced, and the slave masters really took advantage of these people. So the first way, and the most popular way to become free if you were a slave, was through a process called manumission. And what this was a way in which, if you were a slave, you could actually purchase your freedom. So you could work overtime in the mines, or you could actually work out of your home and sell products and things like that. But after years of saving your money, you could actually purchase your own freedom. Another way to be manumitted would be if your slave master set you free. And this usually happened to women more often than men. The women were favored by their slave masters, A, because they worked in the home, and B, probably because there was some mezclando going on there. So they would grant freedom to their favorite women. But the men, the slave masters really wanted to get their dollars worth out of them, so they kept them as slaves for as long as they could, until they were, couldn't work any longer. And as a result, manumission allowed thousands of citizens to become free in Mexico. Under the broader term of manumission was this idea of coartación. And what this was a way of setting the price in a court of law. So the slave masters would go, this is the picture that you see here are white slave masters bidding and buying slaves. And once they would purchase a slave, the price of the slave would be documented and sent to a court of law. So that later on when the slave purchased his freedom, the slave master couldn't keep up in the price on him, so he could barely buy his own freedom.
These are my students.
Okay, next slide, please. The second most popular way of gaining your freedom was to escape. Conditions were horrible on both sides. Even though they had this idea of Las Siete Partidos and they were supposed to be protected, these poor people were just, malnourished, overworked, and so they had no other choice but to escape. The escaped slaves were known as maroons, and in Mexico they would form little communities, secret communities that the Spanish couldn't find, and they were called palenques. In other countries they were known as quibombos, mocambos, cumbes, or mocotes. And probably the most popular maroon of Mexico is Gaspar Yanga. And he actually escaped into the Jalapa Mountains in Veracruz. And he lived in his own palenque for about 30 years in the Jalapa Mountains and was the ruler of a community of about 500 men, women, and children. And they were self-sufficient. They grew their own crops and they had their own cattle and animals. But every so often they would come down out of the mountains and raid Spanish caravans. And the Spaniards just, after so many years, got sick of it and sent a war party to get him and burn down his palenque. Well, they fought, there were heavy losses on both sides, but Gaspar Yanga got his way and he became the first independent black leader of a Mexican community in Mexico. And he settled on the slopes of Mount Totula in Veracruz, and today the town is known as San Lorenzo de los Negros. Another popular way to earn your freedom would be to be born to a to a black woman who was free, you couldn't be a slave regardless of the status of your father. Also, if you happen to be half native and half black, and the mother was native, you couldn't be a slave because remember the slaves had more rights than did the blacks. The fourth way, of course, would be emancipation, and Presidente Vicente Guerrero abolished slavery in Mexico in 1829, and he is known as the first pro-black politician in Mexico, although he denied his own indigenous and black ancestry. And an interesting fact to note is that the United States didn't grant freedom to the slaves until much later, so many blacks in the United States escaped into Mexico and formed their own communities along the Texas-Mexico border, and I think one of those towns is called Nacimiento de los Negros, and it still exists today. Okay, now let's get into this caste system, because we know we've got all of a sudden we've got all these free black people running around, and you know, what are the white settlers going to do with all these people? So they promoted miscegenation to whiten the country. They thought that if they could mix these people in with the natives and the white populations, maybe they could have an overall whitening of the country, and also as a way to populate underpopulated areas in Mexico. So due to the high increase of interbreeding, we have this term arising, mestizaje. So out of this mestizaje, the elite in Mexico needed to create a socioeconomic system to identify where you were on the social ladder, on the scale of things. And of course, blacks held the lowest position. I'm going to get into sort of the more complicated caste scale in just a moment, but this is the basic early Mexican caste system, where we have peninsulares on the top. And peninsulares are the Europeans that they're white, they've come to Mexico, and now they're living there, and they're the highest on the social scale. Right beneath them are their children, the criollos. They are pure European blood, but they were born in Mexico. Right beneath them we have the mestizos, who are a mixture of white and indigenous blood, and right beneath them are the indigenous peoples. And lumped together at the bottom are mulatos, zambos, and negros. Mulatos are, it's a mixing of white blood and black blood, and zambos are a mixing of black and indigenous. So it might be a little bit hard to read, but I did this intentionally to show you how complicated this system of the caste system was in Mexico. I mean, they were so preoccupied with who you were, where you were at, what your children were. So, for example, I have this is just a small sample of the total list. A Spanish male mates with an Amerindian woman and produces a mestizo. A mestizo male mates with a Spanish woman and produces a castizo. A castizo male mates with a Spanish woman to produce an español. A mulato male mates with an española woman to produce a morisco. A morisco with an española woman produces a chino. A chino con una mujer india produces a salsa atrás. Now, to me, salsa atrás has a negative connotation to it, and it gets worse. A salsa atrás mates with a mulata and produces a lobo. A lobo mates with a china produces a jibaro. A jibaro mates with a mulata and produces an albarazado. So they had a term for everybody. It's pretty major. So with this idea of a caste system, we have this idea of race. And through the years of interbreeding and denial, because one way to move up on the social economic scale was A, to deny what your true race was, or B, to marry somebody who had a higher status than you. So that was pretty much the goal. You wanted to move up this ladder. So we have issues of race today in Mexico that have been carried over from this perhaps not legal system, but it's definitely inherent still. Today we see images of blonde hair, blue eyes, really Caucasian features as the ideal beauty in Mexico. And on people in Espanol, we have on the cover Shakira, who's a Mexican
Colombian.
Oh, she is. She's from. Yeah.
I'm Colombian.
But this.
Talia.
Yeah. But I just chose these as an example of what you might see in a beauty contest. When you go to Mexico, who do you see? Do you see people that look like that on the street? No way, Jose. This idea that blacks are inferior were brought over by the European elite and transferred into Mexico. And as a result, being black is something that you want to deny. You might insult somebody by saying that they have black blood in them. Or perhaps when babies are born, you say, oh, que bonita es tu bebé, how lucky. Or, oh, tu bebé es muy bonito, oh, so cute, you know. So this idea that black is not as good as white has carried over. And like I say, through years of interbreeding, the African has been lost in the sea of mestizaje, and not many people even know that Africans formed part of this culture. So, what I really wanted to say, and what I really got out of this project, was that in recognizing the existence of these people, we recognize the amazing contributions that they have made to the American continent. I think that's really important.
You know, I always give me something, you know, I cannot lose my education, Asia. The town today, in 1936, the town was called again Yanga. And the town is called today no San Lorenzo de los Yanga, it's Yanga today. And this town has been visited for many Africans from outsiders, ambassadors, and the press. And since this movement to recognize Yanga, the city has been, you know, they have asphalt at this moment, electricity they didn't have before. You know, so the town is called Yanga at this moment. And again, thank you. You can see how diverse this topic is. And, you know, the students are doing a wonderful, you know, we're doing wonderful research. And every time I see their capstone, I am learning more and more and more and more. And I concentrate, my goodness, this looks like the student for the PhD. I say, these are my students, these are our students. I was so hard with them. Well, we are glad, and we have 5 minutes more.
Oh, I think they keep it. I'll probably have it through this. I'll give you my phone through the summer.
Oh, we have our ways.
Okay, we're going to start again, and the next presenter is Javier Alonso.
And write books.
And because I always give a little history about every presenter here. Yeah, I like history. You know, I like anecdotes. Javier came to my class a year ago, and after, you know, he was new, but after thinking, he's decided that he's going to graduate like this. He said, I'm going to take as much class I can, and I'm going to graduate on May. And I say, okay, how many classes are you ready to take? He said, I don't care. No, so he quit his job, and because I always talking about what's priorities, yes? Okay. And he quit his job, and he said, I am going to do that. I am going to graduate, and he quit his job, and we have here Javier, you know, ready to graduate. But not also this, Javier is, we call this in Polish, it means that when you know a person, you know, and you contact, you have to know everything about them, and to see if you can go to her house and, you know, eat there and sleep there and everything, you know, for free. And also Javier met someone in my class who is a very nice person, Pei, and they are from different countries. And suddenly I found out that Pei and Javier are going together to China. And Javier said, I have to leave the class because I have to go to the concert. And I said, well, go. But then I, hot Pei in my class, and I said, now you explain me what is going on. And Pei was telling me all the things. He's going, like a Latin American or a, Polish guy. He's going to China, and he's going to China with Pei. It means that Pei is going to pay. Or it's for, I don't know, it's Rima, or it's a Rima there, no, so and he's going to spend a lot of time, in Pei houses and everything, so, and I don't know Pei, if I will think about your last name, in English, I will also, go to China, because you will pay for me also pay. So we had this anecdote.
Buenas tardes. My name is Javier Alonso, and I've been here with the institute for about a year and a half. I decided to graduate as soon as possible, and I wasn't going to go into graduate school, but I decided with the help of my professors that it's a good idea to go and experience what graduate school is all about. So this fall, hopefully I'll be assistant to an institution somewhere here in California. I was going to do my presentation and thank some of the people, but I want to make sure I don't forget anybody for the help that they provide here in the institute. Dr. Urioste, who is the first one to open the doors when I first came in here about a year and a half ago. Dr. Gomez for his help with the capstone project. The Doctora Maria Chelina, por supuesto, of course. La profesora Marta Strolli, Hidalgo. I'm still like calling her Hidalgo because that's how I met her, and it's kind of hard to shift for me, so I always think of her as Hidalgo. Besides, Hidalgo was a great man in Mexico. So, Profesora Hidalgo and la Profesora Carnielli, Maria Carnielli, who helped me a lot with my project. Enrico for helping, and he always had a smile every time we asked him. And of course my the people my classmates that always supported me and give me their opinion. Linda Kraft, Pei Shan, Charlie Pedroia, and Monica, who, Doña Teresita, they always somehow, whether negative or positive opinion, always count on her opinion. It's a good thing, always count on her opinion. So thank everyone for being helpful and for having me here. And let's move on with the project. I'm not sure if I should do it in English or Spanish. Let's see. I think I'll do it in Spanglish. Yeah. Historia del Castellano, the history of Castilian, or it's better known as Spanish. And this is a project that it changed from the beginning, from the first decision that I made. It went through a transition. And this is what finally ended up being social cultures and some linguistic legacies that many other cultures influenced in the peninsula, the Iberian Peninsula, to the development of the language and the social structure of Spain. So this is the title, and I'm going to focus on the year 410, 1492, when the Barbarian tribes arrived at the peninsula. Castellano comes from the kingdom of Castilla, el reino de Castilla, y este es su escudo. This is a group that did not offer a lot to the language, but it did to the social structure of the Peninsular Spanish. We inherited from them palabras como alondra, legua, pieza, salmón, carro y cerveza. ¿Qué haríamos sin la cerveza? ¿Verdad? Ellos tejieron este nombre, aportaron a la cultura española. Después vinieron otros grupos que dejaron una huella incrustada en la península, que fueron los romanos. Ellos gobernaron no solamente la península, sino también gran parte de Europa. Y también, por supuesto, influenciaron no solamente al español, también al francés, al portugués y al propio italiano y el rumano en Europa. Hubo cambios de lengua que se convirtió del latín clásico al latín vulgar, que fue el que adoptaron muchas culturas europeas. Como podemos ver, este mapa está un poco difuso, pero as you can see, the Roman Empire, they cover almost the entire Europe, the continent of Europe, north of Africa, algunas partes del Medio Oeste, Middle East. Herencias romanas, una de las grandes herencias y con las que yo he vivido, porque cerca de mi pueblo está un acueducto. Near my hometown there's an aqueduct that we always used to visit when I was a kid. And los romanos nos dejaron formas de arquitectura, muchos de edificios, formas de llevar el agua de un lugar a otro. Este es un acueducto español y este es un acueducto en Francia. No recuerdo la exactitud, pero creo que este en Córdoba y este no recuerdo en qué parte de Francia está. Este acueducto está en México, en Michoacán, y es donde uno de los acueductos de los que siempre viví. Teníamos la presencia, a pesar de que ya estamos en otro continente, la presencia de los romanos aún, a través de los españoles la tenemos, ¿verdad? El vino. Los romanos trajeron el vino, que para muchas culturas hoy en día inclusive es algo esencial en su estilo de vida. El vino en España, el vino en las regiones del sur de Francia, en Italia, inclusive también aquí en Estados Unidos tenemos varias regiones vinícolas. The Bavarians were another tribes they arrived to Europe in the year 1410, and this is where my written text and of my project has the most content on, from 1910 to 1492. And some of the tribes they arrived, they were known as Bavarians because they weren't at war. They were conquering, they were moving along, trying to push away the Romans. The Visigoths, the Vandals, Fulanos y Suevos, que fueron una de muchas, estos fueron los más importantes que llegaron a la península, o de los más, tenían más poderío bélico. Los visigodos. De los visigodos heredamos cuando debemos a ellos se pusieron la religión, a pesar de que ya los romanos tenían la idea de lo que era el catolicismo, pero ellos lo hicieron oficial bajo el reino de Leovigildo, el reinado de Leovigildo, que fue que oficialmente adoptó la religión católica para toda la sociedad peninsular. A ellos debemos la Semana Santa, por supuesto, la Navidad, todos aquellos días festivos relacionados a la religión, que son una infinidad. Tenemos en México que casi cada fin de semana, en España, al igual que España y otros países que son netamente católicos, que casi cada fin de semana hay festividades relacionadas al catolicismo, a la religión, que el señor Leovigildo bajo el reino visigodo nos dejó. El concepto de monarquía, ellos lo trajeron también a la península. Y fue con este concepto que ellos expulsaron a los árabes más tarde. Iban ganando terreno recuperando reinados y hasta finalmente expulsar a los árabes en el año 1492. Como pueden ver, el reino visigodo, the Visigoths, occupied almost the entire peninsula. They were the most powerful, and there's other kingdoms to the north, but they're the ones that occupied almost the entire peninsula. Como les decía anteriormente, la religión católica fue impuesta por Leovigildo, y aquí un ejemplo del arte visigodo que tomé de un libro. Tiene una imagen de Jesucristo en la cruz. Su arte fue poco, pero es de mucho deleite a la vista. Inclusive sus edificios de origen visigodo y artefactos religiosos. La religión se extendió prácticamente con los españoles por gran parte de América y otros países como del sur de Asia, como en Filipinas y algunas otras islas. Así que tenemos el legado de los visigodos, que por medio de ellos se expandió por todo el mundo la religión, posteriormente con la ayuda de los españoles. En el año 711 después de Cristo llegan a España invasores de origen musulmán, o religión musulmana. Ellos empezaron a mover a los visigodos hacia el norte y hasta conquistar la mayor parte de la península ibérica. Estuvieron ahí casi desde 711 hasta el año 1492. Ellos influenciaron bastante, ellos cambiaron radicalmente, para muchos de una forma positiva, para otros de una forma negativa, el estilo de vida de las personas que vivían en ese tiempo en la península española, península ibérica, donde estaba España y también Portugal. Bajo el reinado de los árabes se desarrolló mucho la lengua, las artes, la música, y convivieron aparentemente en armonía las culturas de origen visigodo, de origen judío y la de origen árabe. Un ejemplo de la convivencia de estas sociedades es en la ciudad de Córdoba, donde existen edificios de las tres diferentes religiones, culturas, y que vivieron aparentemente en armonía. Y yo yo soy un apasionado de la música, aprecio mucho la música y